This show is brought to you by our patrons at patreon.com/Elder Scrolls Lorecast.
Robots Radio presents The Elder Scrolls Lorecast.
Welcome to the Elder Scrolls Lorecast, a place where the Elder Scrolls community can come together to discuss the boundaries of our knowledge about the universe of the Elder Scrolls. Welcome, adventurers! I should do the old man voice again. I haven't done him in a while. Welcome, everybody, to the Elder Scrolls Lorecast. We're back, and I am your host, Tom, or Robots. You can call me either. And as usual, my buddy Lotus of Doom is here as well. It is a Friday night. He's wiped out. I'm kind of wiped out. Long week.
Good. Yeah. Good to get some lore going before the weekend starts, though, still.
Yeah, it's good to do lore before you go to bed, and then you have weird dreams about it.
Learn something new and then freak yourself out.
Yeah, we're not going to be too freaked out today, because we're talking about Mara.
I was going to say it's loving.
She's loving and fertile and stuff. But yeah, sorry we couldn't do the show last night. If you're tuning in live at twitch.tv/robotsradio, normally we do these on Thursday nights, but this is Friday night. I was fighting a migraine, and sometimes those last 2 days, and last night still just was no good. No good. You would have gotten a really worn out looking version of myself who didn't use words very well, which isn't that different than the normal version of myself, but it was just a little bit worse.
Slightly more haggard.
Slightly more haggard. But here we are, able to actually talk about lore and do it in a slightly more cohesive way. And so why don't we just dive right into this, Lotus? We got a show to do. So we've been going through the Divines. We're getting close to the end of the list, going through, and this time we're talking about Mara. So Mara is also known as Mother Mara, Mother Mild, and the Divine Mother. And she's the goddess of love, fertility, and agriculture, and compassion. And she's also claimed as the Mother Goddess, and is, of course, one of the Divines. Now, this might sound familiar. This is a very common cultural deity in our own world. Most human cultures, most primitive human cultures up to a certain point, when they had pantheons of gods, or even when they just worshipped nature spirits, have some sort of mother goddess. You know, those like documentaries they'll do where they're like, we found the old fort, and we dug into the ground, and underneath the ground was a burial site from 3,000 years ago, and underneath that was and then they pull out like the little statuette of like the fat lady with the big boobs. Yep. Like those are mother goddesses, usually. That's the assumption. The other assumption on those is that it was a very early version of porn, but most academics like to think that she's a mother goddess in those senses. And the reason for a mother goddess was to worship her and ensure fertility for the fields and for agriculture, which makes sense because if you don't have food, you don't have people.
Right. And I mean, regardless of the situation, we already did our episode on Dibella. So now so that's your porn version. And this is your motherly version, pick and choose. It's fine. We're going to the other half of the situation.
Right. And this was one of those things we talked about in college where it was like, are we sure that's not just like, some horny guy making a statuette of what he thinks is a hot woman?
Yeah.
Like, does it have to be a deity? Like humans do things like that. Like
I'd say there's a pretty solid 50-50 chance.
Right. Like why would humans
it might not all have deep meaning.
Yeah. Why would humans like 5,000 years ago or 10,000 years ago be that different? They weren't that different. But anyway, right. Let's get a little bit more into Mara. We've kind of gone on a sidetrack here. So in the Merithic era, Mara was originally worshipped simply as a fertility goddess, but the sphere of the divine later extended to agriculture and love. So originally she wasn't connected to more than just fertility, and that usually has to do with things like childbirth, but fertility larger would be in agriculture. Nur, the female principle of the cosmos, credited as the mother of creation, is occasionally associated with Mara as a result of her role as the goddess of fertility and agriculture. It's like the two got merged at one point, and there are these myths about Nur falling in love with Anu and rejecting Padme. And if you remember back to the early episodes of this podcast, we talked about Anu and Padme coming together to form souls of themselves that descended in all of that craziness, right?
Well, yeah, and then it devolves into Sithis and everything else, and
eventually end up with Akatosh and Sithis and all, all
the pantheon. The
pantheons below them
tears itself down and down and down and down.
Right. So, there is some very, very early lore about Nur, the mother of creation, and that she was somehow impregnated by Anu, which created everything, which was part of the origin of creation, which seems different than some of these other pantheons and explanations for things. But like always, it depends on who you talk to and what their beliefs are. So that got combined with Mara. And Mara, rather than being a divine for some worshipers and somebody who was secondary to the Akatosh starting time and these other divines now starting to show up, was actually primary to that as Nur, which is interesting. So where she actually falls in the whole time scale of things, maybe it's both. Maybe it's one, maybe it's
Right, it's a little less concrete with her.
Exactly. So Mara is considered a near universal deity, as the divine is featured in the pantheons of all the races of the continent of Tamriel, save the Dunmer and the Argonians. She's one of the few that shows up everywhere. A lot of the ones we talked about previously show up in only very specific ones, most likely the Aldmer/Altmer pantheon, or the Manish races that came over from Atmora,
Yerkuda, any of that stuff.
Right. So different cultures attribute different relationships between Mara and the other gods. The Nords of Skyrim consider Mara a handmaiden of Kine and concubine of Shor, who's Lorkhan, right? So Kinnereth, handmaiden of Kinnereth, concubine of Lorkhan. Okay, so hold that in your head. However, the Bretons, Altmer, and Bosmer, who all have more of a elven bent on their understanding of things. Remember, the Bretons were a combination between elves and men. So this all comes from like the Aldmer side of things. Consider Mara to be the wife of Akatosh or Ariel. Again, that different tier thing. What tier did she show up? To the elves. So very different. I want you to take a look at these two things, because either she is the wife of Akatosh or the concubine of Shor. Now, notice of Lorkhan.
Of Lorkhan.
Right. And Akatosh and Lorkhan are kind of opposites in a way. They often end up on opposite sides of the spectrum. There was the whole thing with, Lorkhan's heart being tossed into the ocean and all that. So she could be both? Theoretically?
Sure. No, I'm just kidding. Sure. Sorry, I couldn't resist. She could be, and what with them holding different divines in how can I put this? Different divines in different regards. It's almost like she is being paired depending upon what that culture has placed as like the higher of the two in some situations, like what priority might be. So it's kind of different interpretations of the same thing, kind of going toward the same result, but since you're starting at different points, it's weird to get to the same location. You got to kind of take a different path to get there, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's all of this is very interesting. So let's continue, and then we can talk a little bit more about some of these details. Other faiths acclaim Mara as the wife of Lorkhan or concubine of Akatosh. So it may in fact be the reverse relationships.
There you go.
Right.
Backwards.
Or in some cases, concubine of both, which means, and the difference between a concubine and a wife is that a wife achieves a certain status alongside. It is a, traditionally, it is a marriage relationship, which means that the wife takes on the status of the importance of being the wife to the husband, the roles in the family that come with that, and all of those kinds of things. A concubine is typically the sexual interest of a ruler, but comes with it no authority of any type.
Right. It's a behind the scenes love interest type of deal.
Yes, and sometimes in front of the
they're
scenes
not necessarily
love interest.
hidden, but
yeah,
it's just, not the same status.
Exactly. And in a lot of cultures, concubines are very accepted. They're just part of a natural part of that culture, but they don't get the same status as wife. That doesn't mean that they're any less important when it comes to things like child rearing or the love and caring between the two individuals. Oftentimes rulers fell in love with their concubines and loved them more than their wives, but the wives were the ones with the status due to political reasons, not the concubines. So it gets kind of messy there. So let's see. I lost my place. Here we go. In Arche, the god of birth and death, here we go. Mimophanes, I think that's how you pronounce it, the scribe, claims that Mara defied Arche, the god of birth and death, so to allow him to teach mortals the necessity of life and death. In the first era, the divine punished Sai, god of luck, and deprived him, punished Sai, god of luck, and deprived him of his body for his failure to uphold his pact with Ebenarm, god of war, to spread luck throughout Tamriel in the god's absence. Saint Alessia consulted Mara during her slave revolt against the Aelids in the First Era. And the Warp in the West, also known as the Miracle of Peace in the Third Era 417, we've talked about the Warp in the West a bit, is acclaimed as the work of Mara, Akatosh, and Stendar. It is unknown if Mara successfully destroyed the Skull of Corruption, a Daedric artifact in the Fourth Era 201. So she has some other influences and things that she's get attributed to her over time, but there's a lot of like vagueness to this, and she's pulled into these other discussions about these other gods. And a lot of this comes from the older titles in the series. So whenever you hear like discussion about Sai and Ebenarm and like those individuals, that tends to be older lore, according to not older in necessarily in the age within the games, but in the real world it was earlier written into the game.
Literal early writings like Daggerfalls and Arena, stuff like that. Before, it's kind of the pre-Morrowind era is usually how I just kind of refer to it, because once
thanks for the follow, buddy.
Morrowind hit, the lore took a bit of a twist and new direction. What with the heavy hand of Michael Kirkbride, love him or hate him.
Absolutely, yeah. So things kind of went into the different directions, but typically the thing that most places seem to tag into is this relationship, romantic relationship between her and a very important deity that has something to do with either the creation of time or the creation of creation, either Akatosh or Lorkhan, right? Yep. Like both of those people were very instrumental in those things, and a general love and focus on reproduction, fertility. So that seems to be the crux of this, and why she works for many different, I guess, faiths, or how she converted from one faith to another and still maintained her status, I guess, is another way you could look at that. Because that's what happens oftentimes in religion, is that as religion gets passed from one group to another, it converts with the cultures that it's moving to. And we've talked about this before, Lotus, how sometimes the thing that the culture explains about the god says more about the culture than it does about the god.
Yes.
They imprint themselves on it. So there's that as well.
The other thing that's actually kind of fascinating, because this last little bit I find interesting because of what is kind of, so there are actual events that happen, and we've regularly made points of how much do the divines actually do. And you had made this statement of like, well, maybe it's more of a being than a doing thing. But in Mara's case, just based on some of the bits that have been noted in the unofficial Elder Scrolls pages, where the Warp in the West supposedly had her. There's a lot of instances where, now granted, this doesn't seem like there's any concrete evidence one way or another, but her being involved is a little more common than we've seen with some of the other Aedra so far, which is kind of, an interesting change, because usually you can maybe find like one or two things. Mara's actually got a few that has her name attached to them, whether or not it was real or not. It's just interesting that it was even thought of that she would have some type of influence on these situations, where usually it's just, they're there.
And they're there, maybe. Yeah.
Right.
I've got some thoughts on that. Like, in universe, Mara is the first of the divines we've talked about that has a more fundamental personal quality to her.
Very much so.
The fact that it's about love, fertility, agriculture, like these, but especially the love side of it. Like, you know what love feels like. You know what you want to feel when you want to fall in love with somebody, or when you're looking for a spouse, or when you bear children. There's something very personal about that feeling. And even if she is being that love, it's something that you feel personally and you feel active within yourself, rather than something like the flow of time, which, sure, we all feel the flow of time, but it's way more amorphous, right?
And Mara directly has a part in the games, which very specifically in Skyrim is one of the few Aedra and divines that you have an actual ritual that you can do in game. Like, if you want to get married in Skyrim, you have to get an amulet of Mara and present it to somebody in order to marry them. That's like direct connection. Like, you are actually involved with a ritual with this divine, which that's very different than most of them, which you can go pray at a thing to get a blessing, a buff in game and remove ailments. But, this is actually like a feature of Skyrim specifically, that you interact with Mara theoretically and her ritual in order to get married in game. So it's much more of a tangible divine than anything we've talked about prior.
Right. Unless you're like the emperor and now you're interacting with the gem and the.
I suppose if you played Daggerfall multiple times and got different endings, you also just interacted with Breaking Akatosh. So, I mean, there's that too, I suppose.
Yeah. But most people don't get that experience, right? Whereas most people can have the experience of marrying somebody. Like, that's generally open to everyone. Whereas only one person in a generation is going to be emperor, theoretically. It'll usually be multiple, but it's a much more selective group, right? Yeah, absolutely. So according to the UESP wiki, it goes into this section about teachings, and it says, as goddess of love, Mara is the bearer of love and shines that light of love on all mortals. Mara gave life to mortals so that they may love. This is interesting because this is like reason for creation, right? Like, gave life to mortals so that they may love, and assigning her as a creator of the mortals for a purpose is a very interesting way to process this. And this comes specifically from the Heart's Day Mass Wedding, which is by lore master Lawrence Schick, which is, of course, an in-game book and talks about it's one of the things that gets read, say, at a wedding service. So maybe this is just flowery language, but maybe this is something that some of the mortals teach. I doubt that this is something that's more elven, because the elves believe that they were not given life. They believe that they descended from the divine. So, and
with Lawrence Schick being the former lore master, as things have progressed, sometimes you also get different interpretations, because the Elder Scrolls as a whole is written by more than just one person, and we've had more than a single lore master. So some things might have had a little bit of redirection over time. So
sure,
what was once a thing from one person might not be quite as accurate anymore because it's turned in a new way type of deal.
Right. There's a refrain in this, I'm not going to read the whole thing, that says, as Mara is life, so life is love. As Mara is life, so life is love. And then another one says, as Mara gave life, so we give love. As Mara gave life, so we give love. Which doesn't necessarily mean created us. It could be gives us the ability to birth and be born, which could be a very distinct difference. All mortals are born, and birth, childbirth, fertility is something that Mara oversees, but that doesn't mean she necessarily created mortals. Do you see the difference there?
Yep.
So it's one of those documents you could interpret it in a few different ways. I would rather interpret it that way because that makes more sense, at least with the Elven pantheon and their beliefs. But even the mortal pantheon, like there's very little out there that's like Mara was the creator of man, say the Nords or something. Like it's not exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
So it goes on. It says the gift of love was bestowed upon mortals by the divine, so to honor Mara and allow them to understand the true nature of the divines. Mara teaches that love provides nourishment and life to all mortals. The divine commands mortals to, quote, live soberly and peacefully, honor your parents, and preserve the peace and security of home and family. Mara's benevolence is eternal, and those who offer their love to the divines will never be forsaken. The warmth of Mara shapes the destiny of mortals and can be felt across Tamriel. Priests of Mara teach that the divine is omnipresent, and her love and affection can be found in the heart of all mortals, thus linking them to Mara. The holy truth declares that love creates life, and therefore those who love create more life. This sounds very Christian to me. Very, the spirit of Christ is in you. The Holy Ghost is in you. Therefore, God so loved the world. Therefore, you should love each other. Like that kind of stuff. This seems very Christian.
It seems to have a more concrete connection to that than you kind of usually see. Like there's always parallels between real life and different things, but this one seems a little more solidified than we've seen with some of the others. Yeah.
And then it goes on and says, Mara is also the patron of marriage, and the act of union is carried out at her shrines and temples, like you were talking about. The divine teaches that the spark of union between two mortals comes from within and is not based on appearance. People don't get married because they think they look hot. The spark comes from within. The oaths and vows of marriage create life from love and are respected in the name of Mara. The act of union is confirmed upon taking the pledge of Mara, and Mara does not place any restrictions on marriage. Thus, all may marry, irrespective of gender and race, and unite their souls in the holy union, which is super nice. I think this is one of those things that we need to be appreciative of in our current social situations, as much as some people would disagree with me.
Interesting situation where, when you talk about worlds to live in, the fantasy world of Nirn and the Mundus in general is kind of a hellscape, even though it's very pretty. Yes. Living here just seems like constant threat of being obliterated from things outside your control. Yet in this one aspect, they seem much more tolerant and just accepting of like, hey, if you love someone, you love someone. It doesn't matter otherwise. It's like, wow, that's much more progressive than literally anything else, where it's just like, oh no, I sneezed the wrong way and had my soul ripped out of my body and I was cast into oblivion. So there's one thing that's much more peaceful in their world.
That's true. And now cue all of the reviews that say this podcast is too political. I've gotten a few of those recently, and whatever.
Yeah, well, if you think that's political, I'm going to say you have deeper issues at hand.
Yeah. If you wait, here's the whole thing. If you think that the Elder Scrolls in general is not political, then what are you doing? So many of these storylines have political roots and origins, and and regardless of what I think or what you think, there's politics here, guys. We're going to talk about it.
I was going to say it's a lot. The series is built on it. It's rough.
Yeah, absolutely. So and if you disagree with me or Lotus, that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah,
it's a video game. It's the real world. It doesn't matter. You don't have to agree with us. So it goes on and says, Mara makes her will known to her priests through visions and commands them to aid those whose love needs guidance. The priesthood of Mara strive to unite all mortals and are intolerant of those who are intolerant of others. So tolerance, I think, is absolutely an aspect of Mara that you can, connect to her. So love, fertility, tolerance seems pretty accurate.
Yeah. Good values to have.
Yeah, and seven chat says, just because you didn't pick up on it doesn't mean it's not there. It's there. It's there. Bethesda makes satire all the time, and generally the satire is making fun of some sort of political issue. So why don't we move to the middle of the show, and we'll be back talking about some of the individual types of worship from different locations and places, and even how Mara might be connected to the Yakuden lore, which is going to be interesting. So hang tight.
The skies are marked with numberless sparks, each a fire, and every one a sign.
All right, here we are in the middle of the show, and I've got some exciting news for you guys. Of course, we have to thank our patrons, which I will absolutely do. But we also need to tell you about the fact that this show and the other shows on the Robots Radio Network, potentially, depending on the show hosts who want to do this, are now Xbox and Microsoft affiliates. Holy crap. What does this mean? This means that you can use our link to get something like Game Pass and then play Bethesda games on Game Pass. And it doesn't cost you anything more, but if you use our links, we get a little bit of a kickback, which means that you can help support the show without even signing up on our Patreon or anything. In fact, if you're just going to renew your Game Pass and you already are using it, or your Xbox Live, or you want to get like a copy of, I don't know, Windows or whatever, use our link, go get it, and then we get a little bit of a kickback. So big thanks to anyone who does that. Highly, highly appreciated. If you just want the link right now, it's in the show notes, but you could also type bit.ly, so the link shortener, bit.ly/RR Game Pass, and that'll work for anything, but it'll take you to the Game Pass page first. And again, bit.ly/RR for Robots Radio Game Pass. And go ahead and use it, and we get a little bit of a kickback, and it would be awesome. And also, thank you to our patrons. You guys are phenomenal. Holy crap, we've had a few people sign up in the last week and even upgrade their Patreon status, which is always a wonderful compliment. Anytime you guys are willing to put some money behind the show and help support us, we love the kind words. You guys are so nice to us, but being able to help support us financially is absolutely amazing, because this is what I do full time now. And without you guys, I wouldn't be able to do it. So thank you very, very much. And a special thanks to Daniel O and Noodle Al Dente, who are our Daedric princes currently. And there's still time if you want to sign up for a tier 4 or higher Patreon in order to join us at the end of the month. And the end of the month patron episode will be the last Thursday of every month. And so that is the 24th this month. And so you've got 2 more weeks to sign up for that. And if you don't want to do that and you still want to contribute and help out, then you're welcome to. And you could even get ad-free episodes a day early. You can hear the ridiculous extended banter between me and Lotus and our chat before or after the episode, depending on how that happens, and a whole bunch of other stuff. There's all sorts of other stuff on there. So go check that out. Patreon.com/Elder Scrolls Lorecast is where you go. And thanks again to all of our patrons. You guys are absolutely amazing. Thank you so much.
Yes, you're entirely brilliant. Conquering madness and all that. Blah, 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 blah.
All right. So we are back, and we've got some other details to talk about. So let's talk about, we're going to go through and talk about some of these other locations relatively quickly. We have Black Marsh. So the majority of the population in the province of Black Marsh venerate the Hist, of course, because they're Argonians. And in the Second Era, worship among the Argonians of Black Marsh of Mara and the gods was limited to a small minority of those who had assimilated to the cultures from the Empire to the north, right? Imperial missionaries' efforts in the province in the Third Era were unsuccessful as missionaries died from local diseases such as Umfolo, where a temple of Mara was constructed. Mara is known to have been worshipped as a member of the pantheon of the Kothringi, the indigenous humans of Black Marsh, and was considered one of their 3 mothers in the Around Us, as well as Debella and Kinnereth. So, interesting. Any thoughts on this, Lotus?
Yeah, that one's, I feel like that probably wasn't quite what the missionaries had in mind when trying to spread. Again, never go to Black Marsh. It's just
unless you're an Argonian, and then you don't ever really need to leave if you don't want to.
If you're indigenous, piece of cake, you're basically invincible down there anyways, because everybody would die trying to get to you.
And you fit right in, like you're just kind of built for it, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is further proof that is a rough way to go. You go there, and apparently even the goddess of love can't keep you alive. So diseases and probably eaten by plants.
Yeah, probably so. So let's go north to Cyrodiil. The Imperials of the province of Cyrodiil venerate Mara, and the divine is considered part of the Cyrodiilic pantheon, of course. Benevolence of Mara, a cathedral dedicated to the divine, was located in the imperial city, the capital of the province, in the late First Era under the Riemann dynasty. In the 5th century of the Second Era, the imperial city was also home to a Yakudan chapel in the market district, which contained a shrine to Morwa, shaped like a beehive. We're going to talk about Morwa in a little bit. The Temple of Mara, and later the Great Temple of Mara, is known to have been located at Breville in the 2nd and 3rd eras, respectively. In the late 3rd era, wayshrines dedicated to the divine can be found throughout the countryside. At this time, the office of Archbishop of Mara is attested. I believe at this time means like the most recent time period in the game, which is the end of Skyrim. A wayshrine of Mara northwest of the city of Anvil was destroyed during the Oblivion Crisis in the 3rd era 433. In the same year, the Great Chapel of Mara at Breville was desecrated by Aurorans, Daedra in the service of Meridia, and several of its priests were killed. So there's been kind of a pushback against Mara due to all the events during the Oblivion Crisis. So that's Cyrodiil. Any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, Cyrodiil. No, I was going to say Cyrodiil just kind of has like a lot, apparently, because the individual Mara worship, this is all, I don't know any of this fine tuning, in-depth stuff. So it's interesting to see that it's man, she really is got her. Well, for a joke that'll make sense later on, she's got her arms in all of these provinces, so that'll be...
Yes, I like it. So let's talk about Hammerfell. The worship of Mara in the province of Hammerfell is divided between the crowns, who represent the conservatives, and the forebears, who represent the cosmopolitan Redguards. We've talked about this a little bit before, too. Mara is known to both crowns and forebears as Morwa, a fertility goddess. This is the connection to the Yakudan pantheon. However, the names Morwa and Mara are used interchangeably among the forebears. Morwa is considered the favorite wife of Akatosh and Rupga to the forebears and crowns, respectively. It's like these two pantheons merged.
Yeah, it's almost like an Old Testament, New Testament type of deal, where it's just like, this is our history and this is our progressiveness, and then smoosh, you get them together, and then it's kind of, you get not even a clear-cut division in many cases. It's, well, I like this part, or I remember this, and then it gets blended together rather than two things combining. It's literally them mixed up, and then you get full parts of one, but then a kind of amalgamation of the other one and stuff like that. So you get this weird hybrid religion type of thing. Seemingly very involved with Mara or Morwa, which Morwa will be very interesting when we talk about her in a second.
Yeah, I'm saving her to the end because she's pretty good. All right, so then where was I? Sorry, I got distracted by something. Okay, Morwa is considered the favorite wife, blah, blah, blah. The goddess is always depicted with 4 arms so that she may, I love this, grab more husbands. This is Morwa. And you can see why she's connected to Mara. It has to do with the whole, like, being the wife, fertility goddess, that kind of thing. Mara is worshipped throughout Hammerfell, including the island of Stras Mackay, and is the patron deity of the regions of, oh God, here we go, Antiphilos, Hagia Sophia, Ephesus, which is an actual real-world place in Greece, and Yakalon. In the late Third Era, similarly to High Rock, the benevolence of Mara was responsible for the administration of temples dedicated to Mara and the Marin Knights, who also active in their province, who were also active in in the province at the time. The Conservatorium of Morwah was located in the city of Hegath in the late First Era. So a big mixing of these two things. And whenever we bring up the benevolence of Mara, that's Mara, that's a group that was responsible for a lot of things happening. Yes. So any other thoughts on that one?
Not really. That's just it's an interesting set of everything, because their kind of dual old school, new school take on it is one of the more unique ones, with, Morwa being it's funny, just the versions of Morwa that's been shown throughout the games, with Elder Scrolls Redguard, I believe, being specifically the one they were talking about with Petros Mackay, and those awful graphics on that statue. She's definitely taken a different tone to her physical appearance in the series than kind of how she started at certain points, or was depicted by the Yakutans.
Yeah. So we've got High Rock next. Mara, a member of the Pantheon of the Bretons, is the patron deity of several regions of High Rock, such as Anticlair, Bettany, Glenumbra Moors, and Northmoor. Man, these names are so much easier. It's amazing. They came from, a group of people who were inspired by English-speaking places. No wonder they're easier for me to say. In Anticlair, the 21st of last seed was known as Appreciation Day, an ancient holiday of thanksgiving for a bountiful harvest. It was considered a holy and contemplative day devoted to Mara, the goddess protector of the region. In the late Third Era, temples dedicated to the divines were administered by the Benevolence of Mara, a religious organization dedicated to Mara and her teachings, and could be found in major urban centers throughout the province. The Benevolence of Mara was led by a patriarch and was allied to the Temple of Stendar, a religious organization dedicated to Stendar and his teachings. The Marin Knights, who I mentioned before already, were a controversial knightly order dedicated to Mara and the protection of her temples. Seems interesting that you would have a knightly order dedicated for a goddess of love, right?
That is a bit strange.
Yeah. So some within the priesthood of Mara called for the dismemberment of the disbandment, not dismemberment. That would be very different. Disbandment of the order, maybe by dismemberment, while others argued
they were controversial. It was mentioned.
Yeah, the order was necessary to create peace. So they saw them as more protectors and kind of a necessary thing. And thank you for the cheer, Gami boy. I appreciate that.
I was going to say kind of like peace through violence in that situation. They're protecting them, the goddess of love and fertility by murdering those who are not being loving, apparently. Yeah. And it says here in the article about the Marin Knights that they're a militant arm of the Benevolence of Mara, so a part of the larger organization. And despite the fact that their very existence is contradictory to the temple itself, the Marin Knights are sworn to enforce the divine will of Mara, which often is required to bring about the peace. Some members of the Benevolence even feel as if the knightly order should actually disband, but they are, however, in the minority. So there is some internal conflict about that, which is kind of cool. Like, that makes sense. Yeah, rarely are things just universally agreed upon, especially about something like, those two ideas are fundamentally pretty opposed to each other. Like, one is, about love, and the other is about, obviously violence, but it's to protect, the peace of the situation, but you can't just do it through kind words all the time. So it's weird that you almost need to go out of your way to not do the thing you're preaching in order to promote the thing you're trying to preach, which, depending upon how militant people are on either side of that fence, can get a little dicey in discussions. Yeah, totally. It's one of those things that, this is a real world issue. It's like, why do we need armies if we're not trying to attack anybody? And often the answer is because they have armies too. Why should I have a gun? Because other people have guns. Because other people have guns, and I don't want to be unable to protect myself if it comes down to that, right? Right. So it's you build a defense in hopes that you never need it is the idea.
Yeah. So let's talk about Morrowind. The Dunmer of Morrowind largely neglect Mara of worship and the divines. They're one of the few groups that don't include her. However, in the late Third Era, worship of Mara and the divines was practiced by a small minority of Dunmer on the island of Vardenfell. Worship of the divine in Vardenfell in the late Third Era was largely confined to its non-Dunmer population who prayed at shrines operated by the Imperial cult. So that makes sense, right? The Imperials move in, they of course bring their worship with them. A missionary group which combined worship of the divines and provided service for all the divines at shrines found in imperial forts. A shrine to Mara and the divines was also located in the royal palace of Mournhold during this time. Following the collapse of the tribunal temple in the Third Era 427, worshippers of Mara and the divines formed the majority of the Hlalu and Vardenfell districts. In the Second Era, during the Three Banners War, shrines of Mara were located in the cities of Devon's Watch and Mournhold. So you can find some worship there, but it makes sense that the majority of the Dunmer, throughout history, she's not been on their list of...
It's been more of an outside influence that seeped into their culture than something that was bred there naturally.
Of course. And that's, if we go back to talking about the Dunmer, that's because they were worshiping primarily the good Daedra, and then they had the tribunal, and then after the tribunal...
The House of Troubles.
Yeah, then everything gets kind of wacky after that. So... and we also don't really have a good representation of that area after the tribunal falls.
Oh, yeah. And then everything gets weird.
Yeah, so we don't really know. Then we have Skyrim. The divine is also worshipped as a member of the Nordic pantheon. In the Second Era, Mara was associated with the ice wolves that inhabited the mouth of the White River in the northeast of the province. Worship of Mara in the province of Skyrim was widespread for the Fourth Era, and shrines dedicated to the divine could be found both in the wilderness and in urban centers. And this is true. This is one of those things you'll notice if you play Skyrim again. You'll be like, oh, wait, that's another Mara shrine over there. Mm-hmm. Such as the Temple of the Divines in Solitude and at the Temple of Mara in Riften. A pond in the hold of Eastmarch was named after Mara. Some argued the return of the dragons in the Fourth Era 201 was a sign from Mara signaling her displeasure with the people of Skyrim, which is kind of interesting because I guess that would mean that those people believed that she was a wife of Akatosh and had some sway over what happened with that. I
suppose that, I suppose you could, that would be a way of kind of viewing that.
Otherwise, I don't know why she would have the authority to do that, to bring the dragons back. But then again,
right.
Who knows? It's religious worship, so maybe they consider her influential or powerful enough to do that. So last but not least, Somerset Isles. Of course, this is the Altmer. Mara is worshipped in the High Elven pantheon, and Altmer legend tells that Nenamil, the Archon of Song, once embarked on a pilgrimage to see Mara's beauty in person. And I'm going to pause here. There are a lot of these old stories among the Altmer of these like ancient elves who did these phenomenal things and potentially mantled gods. And they're really odd, but may actually have some influence in the way the world and the events played forward, and we may have to dig into this in the future, but it's super weird stuff. But anyway, it goes on. It says, believing that the greatest love he could feel was love for the mother of creation. His journey eventually took him to what is known as Archon's Grove, where he found a flower of surpassing beauty, the so-called Rose of Archon. Upon seeing the flower, he realized that Mara was more than just a being. She was beauty incarnate, found in every existing thing. This goes back to that idea of being rather than doing that I threw out there.
Yep.
And from then on, Nenamil would preach Mara's beauty, and the Rose of Archon would honor and represent her. Roses of Archon are collected by the Sapiarchs for the divine reverence of Mara, a ceremony that lasts for at least 58 days. As many Altmer ceremonies last ridiculous periods of time, this is one of them. So, yeah. So, what do you think about that?
That is a celebration. I don't. one thing the Altmer know how to do is they can drag out whatever they're trying to do. They might have exceedingly long lives, but man, do they spend a lot of it doing the same thing for a really long time. Like a 50, that is a 2-month ceremony when you think about it, pretty much.
Yeah,
like,
that's crazy.
So involved. And can you imagine like how much something like that would cost? Like it's what a concept.
Yeah. This is one of those things that, like, we talked about this a little bit, that like the aristocracy in some old circles would partake in these like really ridiculous like week or month long celebrations because they could. And
just because they could.
It's basically like a frat party that lasts for a month.
Right.
Which is ridiculous. Like, I can't imagine, like, that's got to be nuts. So to wrap this up, let's talk about Morwa. So Morwa, and this stuff is great, guys. Also called the Teat god. Yes, Teat, T-E-A-T. And Lady Morwa is the Yakutan goddess of fertility and love. She is a fundamental deity in the Yakutan pantheon and is the favorite wife of Tall Papa. So in this pantheon, there are multiple wives. This isn't just like a wife and a husband and then maybe concubines. This is multiple wives with one being the favorite. Morwa is always portrayed as a 4 arms woman so that she can grab more husbands. And this is the best quote. I love that this is a quote. It's in the Varieties of Faith, which is one of those like major main books that gets read and referenced all the time. Her shrines are the shape of a beehive. She was described by potentate Versidu Shai as the lusty fertility goddess of the Yakutans, but not as lusty as Debella.
This was one, we had obviously talked about a little bit of this with the Debella episode, yes. But I love the lustiness scale. It's like, oh, well, this is the lusty goddess, but not that lusty. It's like,
yeah, this one's just a little, she's kind of lusty. The other one's like way lusty.
Minimal lust.
Right. Yeah. Like on the scale of like, I don't know, something to Argonian maid. Where did these lie?
Yeah,
I need to have like a not lusty. Who's not lusty at all?
Oh man, who's a good not lusty? You know what? We'll just Mana Marco on one side,
Mary
and
Marco.
Lusty Argonian maid on the other side, and she's like a solid five or six.
Yeah, right. Manny Marco to Lusty Argonian maid. Yeah, but Debella, she's like an 11. She's like more than the Argonian maid. I turned it up to 11. It doesn't go to 11. Mine does. Her priestesses are known to officiate and marry couples. Sources have conflated Arche with the divines with Morwa in the past, although it's unknown if this was speaking to a true connection or was simply a scholarly mistake. So again, who knows, right? Ornate silver teaspoon sets of 4 are a way of honoring Morwa, one for each of her breasts. What? Sure. So she's not only got 4 arms, she's got 4 teats because
she works in quads.
She works in quads, yes, because she can bear all the children. Like,
right.
What's interesting is that like once you get to multiple boobs, then now you're talking like more animal quality than mannish quality.
Yeah,
which is interesting. Like a dog or a cow or something like that has lots of children. There is a Morowa Conservatorium in the city of Hegath, which I mentioned before. There is one known play involving Morwa, Lady Morwa's latest marriage. So maybe she gets married over and over again because that's just what she does. Maybe because
she's grabbing up all the husbands. So
yeah, she's lusty. She's grabbing those husbands. That's just what she does. So there you go. And you can see how that's different culturally than Mara because the cultures are different. In a culture where you have a single marriage and then maybe concubines, that's the way things get described. In a culture where multiple marriages can happen, remarriages can happen, multiple spouses, then that's how you get things described. So again, it may just be a aspect of the culture imprinting on the god rather than the god imprinting on the culture.
Right. The only other thing that I figure we might want to do just for sake of continuity, and I'm very lazy, so hopefully you'll be able to pull this up. I can even give you the picture. We've been showing what each of the shrines looks like.
Yeah.
Each time, and hers is strange to me, actually.
The one with the face in the middle, the cross with the face.
That's the one.
Here, I'll pull it up while you're talking.
Because she's got an emblem and stuff like that, but her face, and it's back on my game shelf behind me, and I'm far too lazy to get up. So I was hoping.
So here it is. Here it is on the screen right now, right between us. Here, I'll go over here so we can still see me. There it is.
So,
how do you want to describe this?
So it's a circle with the best way I can explain this is it is a circle on a pedestal with a cross and a face in the middle, and it almost looks like the Celtic weaving intertwining all of it.
Yes, it's like almost like a chain wound around the inside of the circle.
Right. This one is a little strange to me compared to some of the others that I've been able to sort of piece together. I don't know. This one the face in the middle is not inviting. It is
feminine.
creepy.
It's feminine, and it appears that the eyes are closed. I have to wonder.
The eyes are closed.
Do you think it's an infant?
Oh, maybe.
Do you think this represents childbirth in a way? Like this might be a reference to a female body part? Potentially.
All right. I didn't really have a reference point to this one because I've always thought this one is kind of strange.
Right. It's kind of like a flower too.
Yes, I could. Okay. So you might have a little more of a concrete idea than I did then, because this one has always been like, why is this? Why is this the Shrine of Mara? I don't get it. But okay. What you said, I could see that. I could see something like that.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, just off the cuff. There's a flower quality to it. There's potentially, you could argue that it's somewhat like the child of an infant coming out of a hole in the middle.
Sure.
So there could be reference of birth. There's what seems to be this linking chain, which you could reference to be like life connected to other life or love.
That's the only part of it that I feel is like, you could have the interweavings of all of these things with marriage and stuff like that as well.
Right. Or even vines.
You're sure. It's like, growth or, combining two different entities with the people into one. So that I can understand the intertwining. It was always the kind of cross and the face.
The creepy baby face.
It's creeping me out. And it's just like, this is not loving. This is like a necromancer symbol or something weird.
Yeah. I'm going to zoom in real big on the face just because.
Great.
Oh, I stretched it out too. That looks even weirder. Well, the button you use on Photoshop to make it stretch is the
enjoy that, everybody on the video. That's
the eyes are clearly closed.
They're closed.
And
you might be onto
like
something.
Feminine
with that.
lips, though. It does look like a woman, but then again, it could be anybody. It could be a baby.
Yeah. It's weird.
It's
still weird.
Well, let us know your thoughts on this, guys, because...
do you have any crazy theories on that shrine? Because that one, more than many others, I've found to be a bit confusing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's distinct and different than the others, but it shows up like everywhere.
It's very common.
Other emblems include what looks like a knotted rope wrapped around... what seems like a red object, like maybe a heart.
I think it's like a heart or it's a heart or an apple or something like that. I think it's a heart would be the idea.
Right. And then priestesses, and on the rare occasion that you get like a depiction of Mara, she's holding a rope that's linked around itself and creates a loop. But she almost always is represented very motherly. Again, not overly lusty, more like almost like a Virgin Mary kind of. Yeah,
it's very, very similar to that aesthetically in most of the pantheons. The lust factor is definitely not really the focus point the same way it is with Dibella.
Right. Unless you just like women who are covered up a lot. Maybe that's your thing.
Yeah.
That's fine. You can. That's
then Mara is your lady.
Mara is your lady. There's also a the ones that show up in the tombs in Skyrim. This one's very interesting. I'm going to put this in up on the video so you guys can see it while I talk about it. I love noting these because I wasn't sure when I played through Skyrim what these actually meant. That's way too big. Gotta transform and make it smaller. So here you have, remember the wolf reference we talked about? You've got wolf faces along the top. You've got like wolf claws, and you have a woman in the center, flanked by men carrying a sarcophagus of the king and women carrying a sarcophagus of the queen, which is most of these are, with moons on each side. And sorry about the dogs barking. And then the woman in the center has a wolf's head, like on top of her head, like she's wearing it like a hat, like a skinned wolf hat. And then wolf garb on, like she's
right. Yeah, it's very wolf covered. I was going to say that's why the puppies are actually providing a description in the background.
Yeah, they're barking to the wolf mother. Yes,
right. Exactly. They're helping portray exactly what we're talking about.
Right, but this isn't werewolfy. This is animal.
This is
wolf.
like natural wolf. Like there is a wolf in the wild. You see a snow wolf. Okay, that could have a tie to Mara, not a werewolf is shredding a villager or something like that. So.
Right. So that would be very different. So there you go. That's what we got from Mara.
Yeah, that's our overview of Mara.
Yeah, as usual, I find these dives very interesting because they raise a lot of questions and leave us wondering certain things, which I think is wonderful about this stuff. I love that we don't have all the answers, that we can wonder about these things and then experience them in game and look at them a little bit differently the next time we play the games.
And the changes from one culture to another, whether it's different or just completely not there, is something that I find very interesting because it makes it feel, we've made reference to this not real world feeling real. Like it feels lived in. It feels like it goes on whether you're playing it or not, because these are all things that have been taking place, and so many of them mimic how actual things work. And it's like, not everybody just universally agrees on, yup, this is our God, and everybody accepts that, and there are no complaints. And it's like some cultures just don't even have any clue about these things, or they have their own interpretations of it. It all feels very, very lived in and real.
Yeah, and that's what I love about this stuff, is that the discussion connects to real world things, which connects back to the game, and all of that sweetens everything. It makes all of it more enjoyable. Man, I've been playing. So side note here, right at the end, how have you been enjoying the new Blackwood expansion for ESO?
I love it. So far, I haven't gotten too far on the story, actually. The main story, I've been doing side questings and stuff like that. But love the zone. It's enormous. I'm actually kind of surprised by how much area there is in it. It's very large. The new trial, for anybody who plays ESO and maybe doesn't jump into the trials, definitely suggest this one. Even if you do it on normal or something like that, you don't need to, go all in on hard modes and veteran modes and all that stuff to have a good time with them. It is really fun. I always like to give it space from my initial impression of it to decide in the long run how it is. But my previous favorite trial in the game is the Mauve Lorcage, which came out years ago with the Thieves Guild expansion. Mm-hmm. And this one looks like it might be taking second place overall, actually. Very cool. The Deadlands look gorgeous, which is interesting since the Deadlands are pretty generic hellscape.
Yeah.
They are still generic hellscape, but the art team did such a good job making it feel like more than just a generic hellscape. They added other colors mixed with the red to bring it out. It feels ominous. And one of the things that we were actually saying last night when we were in something called a Doom Vault, which I won't go too deep into. Yes. But yeah, so while we were in a Doom Vault, there's more to it than just Mehrunes Dagon is bad guy, which I already have started to see, and I'm like, okay, I'm interested to see where this is going. And the feeling of just this omnipresent, creepy, evil vibe, they did much better than any other game in the series. I feel like their interpretation of Mehrunes Dagon and the Deadlands specifically and his things, very impressed with. Very impressed with so far. I really like their take on it.
Nice. That's high praise.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm actually. Oh, and the companions are neat, which I didn't think I'd even use them, and I was like, oh, they're actually kind of fun.
Yeah, I just went and got what's the lady's name? Miri. I was like, something. Miri.
That's what I'm using.
Yeah, I went and got her earlier today, and I've done the opposite of you. I've played through story stuff and avoided some of the side quests, and then just today I was like, I'll go get the companion. Bring her around with me, see what I think about that.
Yeah.
So I've been doing kind of the opposite, and man, I mentioned this last week, but talking to Rich and being like, I wish they had more Dark Brotherhood stuff.
Dark Brotherhood thing.
It's just like, I'm sure he was just
without
like,
spoiling anything. You can't even get through the prologue.
Yeah, you can't get through the prologue with a little bit of it, but there's definitely more than just a little bit. It's not just a reference to them. There's a regular, thing.
Yes, there's more to it, which is funny why he probably snickered when you asked that question.
Exactly.
Said, you never know.
Exactly. So, you know what? I just need to start predicting everything because I get really close. Close.
And he said it's interesting sometimes how close people do get. And he's like, did somebody spoil something? Like, did somebody leak something and we don't know about it? Like, but it's all just like, hey, sometimes you get lucky.
Yeah.
Lucky guess or something like that. But no, I strongly recommend it to anybody. There's actually, just from a technical side of things, there is one pretty bad glitch that's annoying if you're doing end game content where there's this block glitch thing. It's not completely unsalvageable, it's just annoying, and supposedly it's getting fixed next week, so it's not like a long-standing thing, which is good. But for the most part, I would also like to just kind of be like, high praise on it's working really well. Like, it launched, and I know there's a lot of little things that they're addressing, but from playing more of the high-end stuff, where timing and precision is like the difference between clearing something or being dead and needing to restart, as opposed to story, you can kind of chill, you relax. A lot of it, outside the block glitch, it's actually been working very well. So it's a pretty smooth launch. It's not something I would even say you necessarily need to wait on for it to get ironed out. Yeah. You can jump in if this is something that's interesting to you. I definitely recommend this expansion right out the gate so far.
Yeah. And if you're somebody who has the game but hasn't jumped into every expansion, and you only want to pick up one or two, like, you could totally do that too, especially if it's just certain storylines or certain bits that you are interested in. You can skip around. It totally works. The fun part is if you do go through things in order, and this happens every time there's a new expansion with the story, the characters reference you and they're like, oh yeah, it's you from this thing, and like they remember, and the dialogue changes based on that. And what I love, we mentioned the Dark Brotherhood shows up, but if you've played through the Dark Brotherhood stuff, there's a point at which you have to be like, so you know that I'm a Dark Brotherhood member, right? And they're like, what? You are? And then there's a whole little discussion about what does that mean? What does that have to do with what's going on? So that stuff's great. I love those little references. It just makes the world feel more lived in, you know?
Yeah,
that's a little tiny thing. But if it didn't do that, you would wonder. You'd be like, well, I did the Dark Brotherhood quest before. Why didn't this come up? Mm-hmm. You know, or I'm a vampire. We're hunting vampires. Why didn't this come up? You know? Yep. It makes everything better. And I appreciate that, because it takes awareness of the things they've previously made. And the more things you make, the more awareness of the previous things that have happened you need to bring into the new things you're writing. So
exactly.
It takes paying attention, which the team does a great job with, which is awesome.
Yeah, they do.
Absolutely. So yeah, go check that stuff out. You got anything else going on, Lotus, before we head out?
No, not really. Ideally, be recording Tales again. There's the Bethesda Showcase this weekend with Xbox, so that should be exciting to see if they announce anything Elder Scrolls, anything related.
Yeah, and you're welcome to join us because I started today. I streamed some of the big reveals for trailers and stuff. I'm going to be doing that tomorrow. I believe 1 o'clock is when things start up again. And then I will be doing it on Sunday, especially for the big Xbox Bethesda stream. Yep. And other hosts across the network will be joining me. We'll be reacting and commenting live. So come join us here, twitch.tv/robotsradio. And Lotus, if you're around and you want to just pop in, if you see us in chat,
for sure.
feel free to just pop in and share your thoughts.
I'll swing by because I wanted to wait till after that showcase before I stream. I'm probably going to be streaming Battlespire due to massive interest in everybody wanting me to suffer. And all the interest.
You found your calling.
Yeah, so great. I'll be known for playing games from 25 years ago. But yeah, so I wanted to wait until I stream until after the Bethesda Showcase because I'm very curious to see what they might announce as they make many of my favorite series.
Yeah. You know what I'd love to see you do after you finish things like Battlespire is watch people speedrun those games and then see if you can speedrun them using the hacks and whatever, like the glitches.
Yeah, we'll see come Extra Lifetime later this year. One of the incentives is actually, or at least has been mentioned to me. I haven't figured out if I can do it or whatever. But there is a lot of people that have said that they would like to see me make a charity goal incentive for Extra Life to be that I need to go back to Arena and try to beat Arena in under a half an hour.
Yeah, I want to see you speedrun these.
Yeah, because I believe the current speedrun record for Arena was like 17 minutes or something.
Holy crap. You know what would be fun is if you and I had a competition.
It took me like 56 hours.
What if you and I did a thing where we competed and we could co-streamed and we competed to raise money. You're going to get more because you've been doing this for long and people know to go to your channel. But we can put announcements out there.
We can brainstorm this.
Yeah. We could both raise money.
I love off-the-wall charity ideas for a good cause.
Yeah, we could both raise money and then we can have a competition to see who can speedrun the game faster without previously training. Right?
Yes.
We can watch
I'll have a
videos
slight
on
advantage because I have beaten it as well.
True.
But
that's true.
I beat it and I'm not going to lie. I pushed most of that out of my brain. And now that I've been playing Battlespire, I kind of wish I could bring some of that back to my brain and push Battlespire out of my brain. So
yeah. And I might have to just play it to get the controls down and stuff, but I won't be practicing the speed run techniques.
You'll definitely want a little time with the controls. They're not intuitive.
Right. But we can have a thing where we just go and we see who can beat it first. And then if you beat it, you can start over and see if you can beat it even faster. And
you might be onto something with this. We'll have to, as the time grows close in the fall, we'll have to brainstorm some ideas about this stuff.
Mm-hmm. That could be fun and painful. What did I just sign myself up for?
Both. Yeah, both.
What am I doing with my life? It's for charity. It's worth it, right?
Yep.
I'll just keep telling myself.
I tell myself all the time.
I'm just going to keep telling myself it's worth it. It's for charity. All right, guys. Well, thanks for tuning in. Please tune in if you guys are live and you listen to this before some of our streams this weekend. Please come hang out with us. We want to see your reactions too to all the big announcements. There's going to be cool stuff. Who knows if we'll get any more about Elder Scrolls 6? We might. It's been 3 years. We'll probably get some doubtful, but you never know. We're almost definitely getting something about Starfield. Who knows what, but maybe something, right? And then, of course, there's other stuff that Bethesda's working on and a bunch of other things. We'd love to have you guys come hang out with us. So please come do that. And remember, we're Xbox affiliates. So if you get Game Pass and want to play some more of these Bethesda games, then make sure you click the link, bit.ly/RR Game Pass. And we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for hanging out, everybody. See you later.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Elder Scrolls Lorecast. If you have something you'd like to contribute to the show, please reach out to us at elderscrollslorecast@gmail.com or on Twitter @ESO Lorecast. I really appreciate you listening, and I'd love to hear from you soon.
You've been listening to a Robots Radio podcast. Smart shows for interesting people. Check out all the shows at robotsradio.net.